Hello, welcome to Cat's Treats. Today we're going to be making a Gateau Vert, which is a somewhat strange cake from a little bit of the forgotten past of the French pastry and cakes realm. Specifically, it's intriguing because this is a cake that consists largely ingredients-wise of pistachios and spinach. So today we are going green with this strange and old little recipe. Also, in terms of the outfit, ignore it for now. We'll go over that later. If you're wondering whether I dress like this on normal days, the answer is yes. So there's three main components to a Gateau Vert. First is going to be our cake part of the cake, which is going to be a Genoese sponge that is pistachio flavored. That is going to be made with slightly under a cup of flour. I know that's a very vague measurement, but it's because I do a lot of small adjustments based on the texture. If you want a specific number for your recipe, I would call that 3/4 of a cup of flour, all-purpose, plus 1 tablespoon, half a cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of melted butter, 4 eggs, and a half cup of pistachios, which we are going to grind and mix in with that. The second component is going to be a thick cream, sort of halfway between a cream and an icing, that we are going to put between the layers of our Gateau Vert. And for that, we're going to need about 200 grams of spinach, 2 egg yolks, we'll use the whites later, half a cup of sugar again, about 1.5 sticks of butter softened, half a cup of water, and 1/3 cup of those pistachios, which again are going to be ground. The third component that's going to go over the top of our cake in place of a more traditional or more modern to our sensibilities icing is going to be a pistachio and almond marzipan. Now, marzipan, especially if you're an American and you're not as used to or familiar with what that word is a kind of fondant-like paste made from nuts. And it's kind of just the better version of fondant in many ways because it's a lot easier to impart flavor into it. It has the same amount of moldability and ability to sculpture, stretch it, and move it around, but a little bit more body and nicer texture to it. Now for that we have 2.5 cups of powdered sugar, those 2 egg whites that came from the yolks we mentioned earlier, half cup of pistachios for the grinding, 1 cup of almond flour, and we're gonna add a little bit of vanilla to this whole thing. As a note, this recipe does traditionally call for the entire marzipan to be made out of ground pistachios, but pistachios are a very expensive nut in comparison with almonds. Luckily, they're also a much more flavorful nut than the almonds, so we don't need as many of them to equal it out. So that's why you're gonna have this mixed ratio. It's just to save a little bit of expense. To start off the cake, we're gonna preheat the oven to 350 degrees, and now I'm gonna grind these pistachios. Add this to the bowl with our other dry ingredients, sugar and flour, 4 eggs, right in there. And this recipe normally calls for about 1 teaspoon of lemon juice to give it a little bit of acid, but I unfortunately am allergic to lemons, so I just use a very small dash of vinegar instead, just to have a similar effect in terms of acidity, but not really impact the flavor very much. All of that goes in the stand mixer, or you can use a hand mixer as well. The important thing is that you're mixing it relatively quickly so that we're creating the maximum amount of bubbles. I'm going to pour that into a greased 8-inch cake pan with parchment paper lining. There we go. That's going into the oven for about 25 minutes, and then I'm going to start to check it. While that bakes, I'm going to start on the marzipan. So the first thing I'm going to do, again, is going to be to grind the half cup of pistachios for that. I'm going to add that to a mixing bowl, along with my almond flour. And most of my powdered sugar, I'm going to leave a little bit more, though, to help with the texture later on. You just mix those dry ingredients together in a bowl and then add with the paddle attachment at a relatively slow speed to the mixing bowl, and gradually, as it goes on that slow speed, add your egg whites. It's Kat from the future. I'm new to this, and I forgot to say that I also put a teaspoon of vanilla in the mixing bowl when I was making the marzipan in the stand mixer. Do that. Once your dry ingredients are incorporated and start to have this clay-like texture to them, we're going to take it out of the bowl and knead it. I sprinkled the surface I'm going to work on with powdered sugar so it doesn't stick too badly. And then I'm just going to begin folding and working the marzipan as if it's dough, adding a bit more powdered sugar and incorporating that when needed, until it starts to feel very moldable and pliable, which it's already pretty near to. There we go. Now it's starting to get that very, very workable, moving from a wet clay texture to more of a Play-Doh texture, if that makes sense. Now that it feels ready, I'm just going to wrap it up in some plastic wrap until I'm ready to use it. Now for the part I'm sure you've been wondering about. What do we do with the spinach in this cake? Pour about a half cup of water into a pot on the stove pot and get it to just before boiling. After I do that, I'm going to gradually put the spinach in that pot with a little bit of water and wait for the spinach to cook down and wilt. As the spinach cooks down, I'm also going to grind the last third cup of the pistachios. Now that the spinach is all wilted, the spinach and the liquid in the spinach bowl is going to go into the food processor that I just took the pistachios out of. I'm going to pour out this weird spinach smoothie into a strainer sitting in a pot and just going to let the water drip from it down into the pot itself to collect. Once you've gotten all of your spinach water, we're going to put that half cup of spinach water on the stove with our sugar and begin cooking that. We're going to leave this on the stove top until it's just starting to bubble and all of the sugar is dissolved. By the way, the cake is done now, so I've taken it out of the oven. We're going to be dealing with that in a second. In the meantime, I have started whisking our 2 egg yolks from earlier. And now that the spinach and sugar mixture is at the right temperature, I'm going to pour it in. This is going to not cook the egg yolks in the way that a scrambled egg does, but it's going to pasteurize them with the low heat and make them, edible and custard-like. We're going to wait for this to cool and then pour it into the mixing bowl. Now I've transferred the egg, sugar, and spinach water mixture into the bowl with the pistachios. And what I'm going to do is slowly add one little pad of the softened butter at a time while it's on about a medium speed setting. If you need to thicken up the mixture, you can always do so by either gradually adding more powdered sugar or a little bit more softened butter. But once it becomes a lighter color like this and stiff enough that you can invert the bowl without being worried about it falling out, you're done and you have your cream. Next, we're going to slice our 1 layer of cake into 2 thinner layers so that we can put the icing in between them. Apply your filling that you just finished making. And your icing on top. Now it really doesn't matter if it looks pretty or super messy here because the marzipan is going to go over everything. Now it's time to roll out the marzipan we prepared earlier. I'm going to sprinkle some powdered sugar on my work surface again to prevent that sticking issue from earlier. And then just unwrap the marzipan and put a little bit more powdered sugar on top so we can roll it out safely. You can roll it out pretty easily just like it's dough. You don't want it to be too thin in terms of danger of breaking, but you want it to be able to drape in one clean shape over your entire cake. Time for the money shot and the stressful part. If there are some small cracks on the top, that's fine because you can always cover it with decoration. But as long as you have it pinched down and over evenly like a pie crust, you're good to go. And you can just cut off the excess like that and snack on it if you want. For the top glaze, I'm just going to do something very simple. I'm going to pour about 1.5 cups of powdered sugar into the mixing bowl and just add the rest of that spinach water with it. I'm just going to mix this together in the mixing bowl until it's nice and smooth and precisely the color of my dress, I might add. And we're just going to slowly pour it onto the top and center of the cake. Any of the excess you can just wipe up while it's still a little damp like this, and then I'm going to wait for the glaze to set for a little bit. You can do that at room temperature for a while, or if you want to speed it up, just put it in the fridge. And while we wait on decorating to happen, I'm going to do a little brief fashion aside. This one-piece dress here is from Tiny Garden, which is an independent Chinese Lolita fashion brand. I'm a big fan of them because I think that they make the most easily wearable and casual Lolita dresses, because most of their stuff is made with these really nice thicker cotton blends, and it's absolutely beautiful in the washing machine. Can't recommend them enough. Another recommendation for myself that I'm saying out loud is an apron, because that makes sense if I'm going to keep doing this. I kept with the motif of the little pearl and gold buttons throughout, echoing that with the necklace, same element, and this little thrifted belt I had. And everything else is honestly just miscellaneous things that have been in my closet forever that I've collected over time with all the time I've been in this fashion. And really the extent of, I'm gonna wear this dress for this video just popped into me because, like, it's cake colored. It's easy. Sometimes I don't have to do anything fancy and multi-leveled and thought. Sometimes it's just green is green, you know? Alright, now that the glaze on the cake is all set, as you can see we have a lovely surface to work with, you can start with the decoration. Now, these cakes you traditionally just have edible fresh flowers as the decor, but since that's not really in season and it's rainy and gross outside right now, I'm just going to pipe some little flowers that I'm going to put on the edge as an accent. I actually just remembered that I also had some leftover marzipan from earlier, so I'm going to use up that to do a little bit of the floral work on the cake instead. Sculpting with marzipan, again, it's just as easy as sculpting with fondant. All you have to do to make a flower out of marzipan is begin with a tiny little cone like this, roll up a bunch of little balls and flatten them, and you can just fold those petals around your core, like so. And I give it a spritz with the little luster dust that I used, which you can also tell I sprayed around the edges of the cake just to give it a nice gold gradient. And all you have to do is just plop it on wherever you want your blossoms to be. You can do however many flowers you want, any kind of decoration. Just play around with it. The last thing I'm going to do is pipe a little border around the edge just to clean it up some. Fuck is my outro? I've never done an outro. And voila, we have a cake. We have a really strange cake they made one time on Great British Bake Off. But she's beautiful, she is ready, she shall be eaten in the very near future.